quietly, in a corner of space most people never even thought about. It was a lonely region far from the busy routes where ships usually traveled. The Galactic Council had marked it long ago as a place with nothing inside it, nothing worth studying, and nothing that could ever bother anyone. They even gave it a plain label, Void Zone 7, because when a place shows nothing for centuries, people stop giving it real names. But humans, for reasons they could never explain simply, liked watching the empty places. They had a deep-range observatory stationed there, a careful project built not because anyone expected trouble, but because humans believed in checking the corners of the universe that others ignored. The observatory itself was not impressive by design. It was small, quiet, and run by a modest team who expected their days to be peaceful. Most of their work involved checking the same readings every morning, logging the same clear results, and sending the same unchanged reports back to Earth. Some people might think this work would be boring, but the humans there understood something important. Even the quietest places can sometimes whisper something strange. And if no one is there to listen, the whisper becomes a warning too late. One ordinary cycle. A small shift appeared in the gravitational readings. The team stared at it, confused at first. It was tiny, almost like a breath of wind passing through still air. One of them thought it might be sensor drift, a normal glitch that happened when the equipment needed recalibration. They cleaned the sensors, ran a test, and expected everything to return to normal. But the next cycle, the same shift appeared again. Slightly stronger. They checked everything again, slower this time, making sure nothing had loosened or overheated. Once again, the device showed the shift. 3 cycles later, it showed up again, but now in a pattern steady, repeating, too organized to be an error. That was the moment the observatory team felt something new in the room. They couldn't describe it clearly, only that the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. Humans have always noticed when something feels wrong, even before the facts become clear. And the team members, working in that quiet place, now felt a kind of alertness creeping into their minds. They gathered around the main monitor, staring at the repeating pattern, and their voices grew quieter without anyone telling them to lower their tone. They knew patterns like this didn't appear on their own. Something had caused it. Something moving where nothing was supposed to move. Something shifting space where space was supposed to be empty forever. The team sent a direct message to Earth, not a loud one, not an emergency one, just a careful report saying the readings didn't match anything known. They expected a slow response. After all, Earth usually handled thousands of messages daily from different stations, but Earth answered quickly. The analysts back home studied the numbers closely. They compared them with older data, scanned for possibilities, and then sent a second request to the observatory. Continue recording, continue watching, and send every shift immediately. The team did exactly that. Hour after hour, cycle after cycle. The readings continued growing, rising like distant footsteps approaching from beyond the horizon. The observers didn't know what it meant, but their instincts told them something was different now. Something had changed in the emptiness. Back on Earth, analysts held quiet discussions behind closed doors. They didn't want to send alarms to the council yet. They didn't want to raise panic or confusion. But they had seen something in the numbers that made them sit straighter in their chairs. The shifts were not random. They matched the signs of a massive object moving through the region, something big, enough to pull space slightly around it. A single ship could not do that dot, and whatever it was. It wasn't broadcasting identification signals. Every known civilization in the galaxy followed basic travel protocols. When you moved through open space, you announced your presence to avoid misunderstandings. Even the smallest exploration craft always did this. It was simple safety. But this object, if it was an object, was silent. The observatory team noticed something else next. The shift wasn't moving on a straight line. It curved, adjusted, and corrected its path. These were movement decisions. That meant someone or something was deciding where to go. The team members felt the quiet worry deepen. It was no longer just a strange reading. It was now something intelligent moving through a region where no one was meant to pass. The team tried to stay calm. They kept working, kept analyzing, kept sending the data. No one wanted to speak the fear clearly. The first person who said it out loud would be the first to admit the possibility they were all trying not to imagine. But every cycle, the shifts grew, and the sense of something approaching became harder to ignore. On Earth, the Defense Command received a detailed report. They didn't panic. Humans rarely panicked when faced with the unknown. Instead, they analyzed, rechecked, and compared the readings with every known fleet signature in recorded history. Nothing matched. Not one known empire had vessels large enough to cause this exact pattern, and no known empire would enter a restricted zone without announcing themselves. Earth now faced a quiet but serious question. If something unknown was moving there, what did it want? Why had it chosen a zone no one cared about? And how had it entered an area that was supposed to be unreachable? They decided not to wait for the Council's slow debates. Humans had learned long ago that early action often prevented larger problems. Earth placed its own monitoring ships on standby. They increased the observatory's data link priority. And most importantly, they began reviewing emergency intercept protocols. Not because they wanted conflict, but because humanity had a rule: always be ready for surprises. The observatory team noticed the difference immediately. Earth's responses arrived faster, clearer, and sharper. Questions became more detailed. Requests became more direct. It was the kind of tone that said the situation had officially changed from unusual to important. Outside the station windows, space still looked calm and quiet. No one could see the shift with their eyes. But the machines continued to show it, stronger and more defined every hour. The team began logging every tiny variation, every miniature tremor in the readings. At times, they forgot to breathe as they watched the numbers change. It felt like they were observing something hidden behind a curtain, about to step into view, and yet nothing visible appeared. Only the signs that something enormous was moving with purpose. Word traveled quietly across Earth's defense network. Only a few people knew the full details, and they were told not to spread unnecessary concern. But those who saw the data understood the truth behind the silence. Whatever was coming, it was not a natural event, not a simple object, and not something that could be ignored. That the team in the observatory grew more nervous, not because they expected danger, but because they sensed they were witnessing the start of something big, something that might change everything humanity believed about the borders of space. One of them looked at the monitor and whispered, almost without meaning to, that it felt like a door opening in a place where a door should not exist. Another said the pattern reminded them of a slow heartbeat approaching from far away. Even though their words were simple, the feeling behind them was deep. Humanity had always trusted its instincts. And right now, those instincts were telling them that something was on the way. Something no one expected. Something no one was prepared for. And it had chosen the quietest corner of the galaxy to make its first move. Part 1 ends there, with humanity watching the darkness, waiting for whatever was approaching, knowing that the next piece of data could change everything. At the moment, the impossible finally happened. After many days of strange readings and silent worry, the Deep Range Observatory detected something no human had ever seen before. It wasn't a small sign or a tiny shift. It wasn't a guess or a suspicion. It was a clear signal, bright and large, appearing on every screen with a sharp clarity that made everyone in the station freeze. Where they stood, something massive had entered the zone. For a long moment, no one spoke. It was as if the air inside the observatory stopped moving. The numbers on the screens changed rapidly, forming stable shapes that were unmistakable. This was not a drifting object. It was not debris. It was not a natural formation. It was a structured mass, multiple objects, arranged in formation, moving together at high speed. That meant only one thing. A fleet had arrived, but no fleet was supposed to be there. The Council had declared that region unreachable long ago. No ship could cross it safely, and no empire had any reason to attempt it. The humans in the observatory looked at each other, unsure how to process what they were seeing. It was the kind of moment people train for, but secretly hope will never come. The observatory sent the readings directly to Earth with the highest priority. The message was marked urgent before anyone even discussed it. There was no time to debate. Something unknown had crossed into a region considered sealed. Earth's analysts received the data within seconds. The moment they saw the new readings, they straightened in their seats. The signal was too structured, too stable, too intentional. They leaned closer to the displays, studying every detail. They zoomed in, recalculated, ran simulations, and compared the data to thousands of historical fleet records. Nothing matched. The unknown fleet didn't look like anything in the Council's archives. It wasn't shaped like the ships used by the older empires. It wasn't built like the cruisers of the expansion species. It wasn't even similar to the distant traders who rarely visited Council space. This fleet had a design the analysts could not identify, and that was only the first problem. The second problem was even stranger. The fleet wasn't sending any signals, not even the basic identification codes required by every traveler in civilized space. It moved silently, without communicating, without greeting, without warning. For a region marked empty for generations, the sight of a silent fleet moving with purpose was more than unusual. It was unsettling. The analysts sent the report to Earth's Defense Command immediately. Within minutes, high-level officers were reviewing the data. Some of them leaned back, fingers pressed together in thought. Others frowned deeply. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of people realizing that the situation had just shifted from curiosity to concern. Back in the observatory, the team watched the readings change. The fleet was getting closer. They couldn't see it with their eyes, but the data made it feel real enough that their bodies reacted with instinctive caution. Human senses are sensitive to danger, even when the danger cannot be seen. One of the team asked quietly if they should try sending a message, but the others hesitated. They didn't know who or what was listening. Earth made that decision for them. A message was prepared, calm and straightforward, asking the unknown ships to identify themselves and explaining that they were entering a region monitored by human stations. The observatory transmitted the message, and then all they could do was wait. The reply never came. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still nothing. The silent fleet kept moving. In the background, Earth was already reaching a decision. They could not assume the fleet was hostile, but they also could not assume it was friendly. And they definitely could not ignore the fact that it was entering the galaxy through a zone everyone believed was unreachable. Earth activated its early response procedures. These were not war protocols, but careful, calculated steps created for situations exactly like this, when something unknown appears and no one understands its intentions. Human ships began preparing for deployment. Crews were called to stations. Engines were warmed. Systems were checked thoroughly. The goal was simple: observe, understand, and be ready to react if necessary. The observatory staff noticed, from the tone of Earth's messages, that the situation was growing more serious. They continued feeding the new data into the main channel. Every time the fleet changed direction even slightly, The team recorded it. Every small variation in signal density or structure was logged. Their screens became filled with new lines of data. Shifting like tides of information. The fleet did something next that made every human watching sit forward. It slowed down. Not because of damage, not because of interference. The slowing was smooth and intentional. The formation spread slightly, then reshaped itself again, like a group preparing for a specific action. This was not the behavior of wandering explorers or lost travelers. This looked like preparation. But preparation for what? The team didn't know. Earth didn't know. No one in the council knew, because the council still wasn't aware of what was happening. Earth had chosen to wait before notifying them. The council was known for long discussions and slow reactions. Earth wanted clear information first. There was no point in triggering a massive interspecies meeting without knowing what exactly the threat or discovery was. The fleet continued to drift forward, slowing gradually as if evaluating something unseen. Then, in a moment that sent a subtle tension through every human observer, the fleet spread into a wide arc. Earth's analysts saw the pattern. Immediately. This was a formation used when scanning a region. The unknown ships were searching for something. The observatory team exchanged uneasy looks. The unknown fleet wasn't simply passing through. It had a purpose in the zone. It was performing operations no one could understand. Earth sent another message, polite and clear, asking the fleet to identify itself and explain its presence. Humans always started with diplomacy. They believed communication prevented most problems. It was one of the quiet rules that guided their behavior. But once again, the fleet offered no reply. The silence, this time, felt heavier. The observatory continued to collect data. They watched the ships reposition themselves with perfect synchronization. There was no sign of hesitation, no drift, no imbalance. Whoever controlled them was precise, organized, and confident in their movements. Earth began preparing for a potential intercept. This didn't mean confrontation. It simply meant they needed ships in the region to understand what was happening. They began calculating jump routes, choosing the vessels with the best sensors, the strongest communication arrays, and the fastest reaction time. Every step was taken quietly and carefully. The observatory team watched the silent fleet and felt a strange combination of excitement and unease. Humans were curious by nature, and mystery always attracted their attention. But this mystery carried enough weight to make even the bravest observer feel a slight pressure in their chest. Earth finally made a decision that shifted the situation even further. They prepared a complete intercept fleet, still not a war force, but strong enough to handle unexpected developments. These ships were not chosen because of their weapons, but because of their speed, intelligence systems, and ability to respond to unknown situations. They were the scouts of humanity, and humanity needed answers. The observers continued to watch the region, their screens filled with repeating lines that showed the movement of each unknown ship. Sometimes the humans forgot to blink. Sometimes they forgot to breathe. Each new shift brought them closer to understanding something that no one in the galaxy had ever expected to witness. Then, at last, the unknown fleet performed a maneuver that changed everything. It turned, not slightly, not subtly. It rotated its entire formation toward council space, aligning itself with the invisible path that led deeper into the galaxy. The team knew exactly what that meant. The fleet was not drifting anymore. It had chosen its direction. It was moving toward inhabited space. The tension that filled the observatory was not fear, but a sharp awareness. Humans were now watching the beginning of something that would not remain quiet or hidden for much longer. Whatever was coming was on its way, and humanity had been the first to notice. As the unknown fleet continued forward, Earth's intercept fleet prepared to depart. And humanity knew the moment was approaching when the two would finally meet. Earth facing a choice that was becoming heavier by the minute. The unknown fleet had turned toward Council territory, and everyone knew this was no small event. For the first time in generations, something completely unrecognized was entering known space. Humanity could not pretend it wasn't happening. They could not sit quietly and wait to see what the unknown ships wanted. And they definitely couldn't depend on the Galactic Council to react fast enough. Earth had always trusted its own instincts, especially when facing the unknown. Humans had a history of preparing for events others considered impossible. They built backup systems for their backup systems. They watched empty regions for signs no one else cared about. And most importantly, they believed that a small warning today could prevent a huge problem tomorrow. That belief now guided their actions. Earth's Defense Command gathered in a secure communication network. There were no loud voices, no rushed movements, no panic. Everything was quiet and steady, the way people behave when something serious but unclear is unfolding. Screens across the command center displayed the observatory's newest recordings. Clean lines showed the path of the unknown fleet. Sharp patterns revealed its changes in formation. Nothing about the fleet looked random. The officers studied the data for a long time. Some leaned in, their eyes narrow with focus. Others tapped through the layers of information, replaying the movements again and again. The room wasn't full of fear. Instead, it held that feeling humans get when they know they must decide something important before time runs out. Earth had notified no one outside its own network yet, not because they were hiding anything, but because they wanted clarity. They wanted to understand the situation before the Council's long discussions slowed everything down. The Council was good at maintaining peace, but when something sudden appeared, they often took too long to respond. Humanity didn't have that luxury now. Finally, Earth made its decision. They would intercept, not with weapons ready, not with a threatening posture, but with a measured, carefully planned response. The intercept fleet was going to approach the unknown ships, observe their movements, attempt communication, and prepare for any situation that might develop. It was the most balanced choice humanity could make. Earth selected the ships with the best long-range sensors, the strongest communication systems, and the fastest engines. These ships weren't chosen for battle. They were chosen for control, precision, and adaptability. The crews who operated them had trained for years in unpredictable situations. They knew how to stay calm even when nothing made sense. The announcement reached the crews at once. Many had been waiting quietly, sensing that something was coming. When the message arrived, they didn't celebrate, but their posture changed. When people know their role in an important moment, something inside them becomes sharper. That was what happened in every ship preparing for departure. Engines started warming. Systems lit up with steady green indicators. Pilots checked their controls again and again, making sure nothing would fail in the middle of the mission. The teams moved efficiently, speaking in short, clear sentences. Back in the observatory, the staff watched as Earth's intercept fleet prepared to leave. They felt a sense of relief, knowing they were no longer alone in observing the unknown visitors. At the same time, a quiet tension settled in their minds. Something about the silent fleet felt wrong, not dangerous in a harmful sense, but wrong in a way that suggested it didn't belong to anything the galaxy knew. Some of the observers wondered, privately, if they were witnessing the first step in a major event, something future generations would read about. It wasn't an exciting thought, it was a heavy one. They could feel the weight of it even though no one said it aloud. While Earth ships finished their preparations, the unknown fleet continued moving. Still no identification signals. Still no communication. Still no reply to Earth's messages. The silence itself felt strange. Most civilizations communicated even when they didn't intend to enter another territory. But these ships seemed to be following their own path, unswayed by the presence of human observatories or attempts at contact. That silence made everything more unsettling. Earth sent another message, this time slightly more direct. It wasn't rude or aggressive, but it clearly stated that the unknown fleet was nearing a monitored region and needed to identify itself under interstellar travel laws. Again, nothing got the silence stretched, and with each second, the unknown fleet grew larger on the observatory screens. Finally, the intercept fleet left Earth. Their departure was smooth, controlled, and professionally executed. The ships moved in formation as they climbed into the upper atmosphere, then crossed into space with bright engines that cut through the darkness like thin lines of light. Once they reached open space, they activated their long-distance drives. The observers watched the intercept, ships disappear into the deep black of the void. They felt a mixture of pride and worry-pride because humanity had taken action, and worry because no one knew what the intercept fleet would find when it reached the unknown vessels. Earth conformed the Galactic Council at last, but they did not send a dramatic message. They didn't alarm the Council with wild guesses or incomplete fears. They sent a simple report. An unknown fleet had entered the sealed zone, and humanity had launched an intercept mission to understand the situation. The reaction from the Council was slower than Earth had expected. Some Council members asked if the readings were misinterpreted. Others asked if the unknown ships might simply be explorers who had accidentally drifted off course. A few even suggested that the fleet might not be real at all, but an observational error caused by old equipment. Earth responded with the updated recordings. The Council meeting grew quieter. Still, they did not react quickly. They wanted committees formed. They wanted discussions. They wanted every member species to share their opinion before taking any action. Earth respected their process, but couldn't rely on it during a developing situation. Time mattered now. The unknown fleet was still advancing. Back in space, the intercept fleet traveled through the deep, empty region toward Void Zone 7. The crew members inside the ships sat at their stations, watching the stars drift past. Some of them tried to imagine what the unknown fleet might look like up close. Some wondered if they were about to see something no one had ever seen before. All of them understood their responsibility. They were the first line of understanding. They were going to read the intentions of visitors who had arrived from a direction no one thought possible. Meanwhile, the observatory kept sending updates. The unknown fleet had begun adjusting its formation again. It spread wider, then narrowed, then spread again. Every movement was precise. It wasn't random drifting. It was intentional structure. Earth analyzed the patterns again. They didn't match any known military behavior. They also didn't match exploration behavior. The patterns were almost too clean, too exact, like someone was following a carefully written plan. The more people studied the fleet, the more they felt something familiar yet wrong. The fleet wasn't acting like any known civilization. At the same time, it wasn't acting like a wild threat either. It moved steadily, calmly, but with a purpose no one could understand. The intercept fleet received its final instructions as it entered the last segment of the journey. They would approach slowly. They would not activate weapons. They would attempt communication one more time. They would observe everything carefully. And if anything seemed unusual, they would report back instantly. The crew acknowledged the message. Inside the observatory, the humans watched the unknown fleet drifting closer to Council territory. The sense of waiting grew heavier. The feeling that something significant was coming grew stronger. The observers didn't know what kind of event awaited them, but they felt the moment approaching like a storm rising at the edge of the sky. Part 3 ends with Earth's intercept fleet rushing through the dark, heading straight toward the unknown visitors, hoping the meeting would bring answers instead of new mysteries. The moment when the intercept fleet finally reached the outer edge of the unknown fleet's projected path, the darkness around them looked the same as it always did, silent and empty. But everyone on the human ships could feel something different in the air. It was the kind of feeling people get before something unusual happens. A quiet tension in the mind that keeps you alert even when nothing is visible. Inside the lead ship, the crew watched the display screens carefully. The sensors were registering faint energy signatures, growing stronger every hour. These signatures matched the readings the observatory had recorded, but seeing them from up close made them feel much more real. They didn't look like signals from any known engine type. They didn't fit the shape of council vessels, nor the design of any explorers. The signatures were smooth and cold, almost too perfect. The intercept fleet slowed down as they approached the final navigation marker Earth had placed for them. This was the closest point they could reach without entering a direct path in front of the unknown fleet. They wanted to be careful. The goal was to observe, not to challenge. The crew waited in complete focus. Every light on the control panels seemed brighter. Every sound from the machinery seemed louder than usual. People spoke softly, even though there was no reason to whisper. That was human nature. When something unknown approached, voices naturally became calm and steady. The first clear image appeared on the screen, but it wasn't a full visual. The distance was still too great for perfect resolution, but it was enough to see outlines. Enough to see that the unknown vessels were not shaped like anything humans had seen before. Their surfaces were smooth, like one solid piece of material rather than separate sections attached together. They had no windows, no visible markings, no engines glowing at the back. They seemed to glide on invisible rails, as if something deeper than normal physics guided them. The intercept fleet transmitted a message again, polite, neutral, and direct. It informed the unknown fleet that they were entering monitored space and asked them to identify themselves. The message left the ship and traveled into the emptiness between the two fleets. There was no reply. The silence stretched. Again, the human crews didn't panic, but they exchanged uneasy looks. It wasn't normal for any fleet to ignore repeated communication attempts. Even the most isolated species in the galaxy understood the importance of announcing themselves when moving near others. Earth received the visual data and studied it intensely. More analysts joined the review, and more departments quietly shifted their focus toward the unknown fleet. Every station involved understood this was no longer a simple curiosity. This was a real arrival of something foreign, something that did not match anything recorded in the past. Still, Earth held back any action beyond observation. They didn't want to escalate. Humans had learned through history that first contact moments could go wrong simply because of fear or misunderstanding. So humanity's goal was clear: stay steady, stay patient, and gather as much information as possible. The unknown fleet continued moving slowly, and now the human sensors could read more detail. The ships were not identical, but they shared a style-long, curved surfaces, almost organic in their smoothness. No sharp angles, no obvious engines, no bridge area. Their movements were extremely coordinated. It was as if a single mind controlled the entire fleet. The intercept fleet sent another message, slightly stronger, but still polite. They repeated their request for identification and stated their intention clearly. Observation only, no hostility. Again, the fleet remained silent. Inside the human ships, the atmosphere grew heavier. The crew members tried to stay calm, but humans are naturally sensitive to the unknown. It was not fear that grew inside them. It was curiosity mixed with caution. People knew they were standing at the start of something important, something that might change the galaxy's understanding of who lived beyond its borders. The unknown fleet suddenly changed formation. not in a chaotic way, not in a threatening way. It simply opened into a wider arc, the same pattern it had used earlier in the sealed zone. This was their scanning formation. They were analyzing the region ahead. The humans watched it carefully. Nothing about the maneuver suggested aggression, but it also didn't feel like a peaceful greeting. It was the act of a group studying something they didn't fully trust. The intercept fleet held its position, keeping a safe distance. They didn't want to cause confusion by moving too close. Earth instructed them to maintain the pace and continue recording everything. The tension in the air increased when the unknown fleet began slowing again. Their movement pattern changed more gentle, more controlled. They seemed to be adjusting themselves based on the presence of the human ships. For a moment, no one was sure whether the unknown fleet was preparing to communicate or preparing to reposition. Then something unexpected happened. A single ship from the unknown fleet broke formation. It drifted forward, slowly, steadily, leaving the larger group behind. The human ships watched in complete silence as the lone vessel moved closer. The intercept fleet didn't activate any defensive systems. They didn't power their weapons. The order from Earth was firm. Do not provoke. Do not make the first aggressive move. The unknown vessel stopped at a distance that seemed deliberate. It did not come too close, but it did not stay far. It positioned itself at a range commonly used for peaceful observation. Then, for the first time since it appeared in the sealed zone, a faint signal emerged. It wasn't speech. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't any known language. It was a short pulse, 3 beats, steady and calm. The intercept fleet froze. Another pulse. 3 beats again. Same rhythm. Same strength. Same timing. Earth listened. The scientists on Earth compared it with thousands of communication styles from across the galaxy, but nothing matched. The rhythm didn't indicate aggression. It didn't contain any coded threat. It didn't repeat the structured signals used by most navigational systems. It felt like something else. Not a warning, not a declaration, almost like a test signal. The intercept fleet responded with a short, calm message acknowledging the signal. They sent a simple greeting using standard communication patterns recognized across many species. Then they waited again. The unknown vessel responded with the same 3 pulses. It was not communication. It was not speech. But it was the first proof that the unknown fleet was aware of the humans. Outside the ships, the darkness of space stretched quietly, but inside the human fleet, the feeling began to shift. The crew members started to sense that the unknown ships were not ignoring them. They were simply operating on a different system, one humanity had not yet understood. The lone vessel then drifted backward, returning to its position among the larger fleet. The unknown formation tightened again. For a moment, humans wondered whether the unknown ships were preparing to leave. Instead, the unknown fleet started moving forward once more toward Council space. The intercept fleet had a choice to make. Either follow the unknown fleet into Council territory or remain in their current position and simply watch them go. Earth made the decision quickly. The intercept fleet would follow. But at a safe distance, they would not interfere. They would not escort. They would simply observe. Humanity wanted answers, but they also wanted to avoid misunderstandings. As the unknown fleet moved deeper into known space. Earth finally sent a complete report to the loom, Council including the visual recordings and the strange 3-pulse signal. This time, the Council reacted faster. They didn't argue. They didn't question the data. They didn't debate whether the fleet might be harmless. They demanded an emergency meeting. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity already knew. Something unknown had arrived, something organized, silent and precise. And humanity's intercept fleet was now following it into the heart of known space. Part 4 ends with both fleets human and unknown moving, together toward the regions where countless civilizations lived, watched and waited, unaware that something new was approaching their borders. The moment the human fleet entered the silent zone, something changed in the air of every command room back on Earth. People watching the live feed felt a strange mix of fear and pride at the same time. The fleet did not rush or panic. It simply moved forward with a steady confidence, as if the pilots had trained their whole lives for this one night. No one spoke loudly. No one even cleared their throat. It was the kind of quiet that happens before a huge concert begins, or before the curtain rises on a stage. Everyone knew something important was about to start, but no one knew what shape it would take. The alien ships stood in formation far ahead. They were huge, dark, and cold, with structures shaped like long blades and floating towers. They didn't move or speak. Their silence felt heavier than any weapon. The human ships slowed down slightly, taking their positions across the field of stars. Lines of blue engine lights stretched behind them, like glowing paths in a dark ocean. The whole scene looked unreal, as if two different worlds were meeting in a place that was never meant for either of them. Inside the lead human carrier, the crew worked with careful focus. Every radar pulse, every signal check, every engine reading was done twice. The commander watched the alien shapes on the screen and felt an old memory rise up, a memory of learning why this zone was called unreachable. No one was supposed to arrive here. No one was supposed to come out of the darkness. And yet something had arrived anyway, something large enough to threaten entire star systems if left alone. The commander finally gave the order to send the message. It traveled through space like a gentle wave, plain and simple, without any aggression. Humans never believed in shouting at strangers. They always tried to understand first. The message said only two things: identify yourselves or withdraw. No threats. No warnings. Just a clear request for peace or clarity. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The alien ships remained motionless. The human crew waited, staring at the screen, holding their breath without meaning to. Even the people on Earth watching the broadcast leaned closer to their displays, hoping for a sign that this meeting could end without danger. But then the alien fleet reacted in the one way everyone feared. Their ships began to glow with sharp red lights. Energy readings spiked across every sensor. One by one, their weapons powered up. When the first reading appeared on the human scanners, the air inside the human command ship grew heavy. The crew exchanged silent looks. No one wanted a fight. No one wanted to be the one who started something this big. But they all understood the truth. If they waited too long, the alien fleet would strike first. Earth could not risk that. The galaxy could not risk that. So the commander took a deep breath, steadied their voice, and sent the reply that marked the beginning of something the galaxy would talk about for generations. Defensive posture. Do not fire unless fired upon. It was a calm order, but the weight behind it was enormous. Every ship in the human fleet shifted into position like a single heartbeat. Shields rose. Engines adjusted to combat range. Defense systems locked on to potential threats. Human pilots tightened their gloves and checked their controls. They didn't move with fear. They moved with duty. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They simply saw themselves as protectors of the home they came from. The alien ships started to advance, slow and quiet. Their formation changed into a wide arc meant to trap the human fleet. The movement was precise and practiced, as if they had done this many times to other civilizations. But this time was different. This time they were facing humans who had never stepped into this part of the galaxy before, but who were not new to danger. Humanity had learned from history, from struggle, from old mistakes. They knew that when someone tried to trap you, the worst thing you could do was freeze. The human fleet shifted slightly, breaking into multiple layers instead of staying in one tight group. Some ships rose higher, others moved lower, and some spread outward to widen the defensive line. It was a formation that looked fragile to outsiders, but was actually one of Earth's oldest battle patterns, used not to attack, but to break enemy control of the field. The aliens noticed the movement and responded by powering up even more systems. For a moment, the stars around them flickered with strange lights. Then, without warning, a single alien ship fired a bright beam toward the human fleet. It was not aimed to destroy, but to test. A warning shot. But even a warning shot carried danger. The beam hit the outer edge of a human cruiser's shield and scattered into glowing sparks. The shield held, but the message was clear. The aliens had chosen aggression. They believed they could intimidate the humans. They believed the humans would back away, but humans did not. Come this far to run. The commander of the human fleet watched the shield readings stabilize, and finally gave the order no one wanted, but everyone expected. Return fire. Minimal force. Disable, do not destroy. Even then, even after being attacked, humans refused to answer with full violence. They gave the aliens one more chance to rethink their actions. Several human ships fired thin, focused energy lines toward the alien vessel that had attacked. The shots hit precisely at the wings of its engine structure. Everyone watching saw the alien craft shudder, lose balance, and slow down quickly. It wasn't destroyed. It wasn't even heavily damaged. It was simply stopped, disabled with a level of control that shocked even the council members, who had been watching from afar. The alien fleet responded instantly. They broke formation and opened fire from multiple directions. Streams of energy crossed the dark zone like flashes of lightning. The human fleet shielded itself, letting the energy ripple across its defenses. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't break. They stood firm, absorbing the attacks until the enemy's pattern became clear. Humans had always studied behavior deeply, and this battle showed why it mattered. The alien attacks were strong, but predictable. Their formation looked threatening, but it had gaps. Their strategy depended on overwhelming fear, not precision. And once the human pilots saw the rhythm of their movements, the tide shifted. The human fleet spread wider, making it harder for the aliens to target them. Some ships moved forward, others circled to the sides, and a few rose above the alien formation. It was like watching a calm ocean rise quietly against a storm. The aliens tried to adjust, but the humans were faster, smarter, and more coordinated than anyone expected. Every time the aliens fired, human ships dodged with smooth, practiced movements. Every time the aliens tried to surround them, the humans slipped through the openings. Soon, the alien fleet's advantage began to fade. Their shots grew less controlled. Their formation weakened. They had never faced an opponent that refused to break under pressure. The humans didn't push forward to destroy them. They pushed forward to stop them. The goal was clear from the start. Protect the galaxy from whatever these invaders wanted to build in this forgotten zone. No more, no less. One by one, human ships disabled key alien vessels with precise low-force shots. Engine wings, weapon tips, sensor towers, each hit carefully chosen to shut down without harming anyone inside. The aliens fought hard, but their discipline began to crack. Their formation collapsed. Some ships attempted to retreat deeper into the void. Others powered down as if they finally understood that they could not win. In the final moments of the conflict, the human fleet stood unmatched. Not because they were the biggest, not because they were the most aggressive, but because they fought with purpose and clarity. They chose control over chaos. They chose discipline over fear. They chose protection over destruction. When the last alien ship powered down its weapons, the commander finally sent the final message. This zone will remain safe. Leave peacefully. No further action is needed. The aliens did not reply, but slowly, carefully, their fleet began to drift away, pulling back into the dark space where they had come from. The threat faded like a shadow lifting at sunrise. And in that moment, the galaxy changed. The Galactic Council watched in silent disbelief. Humanity, the species they once thought of as young and inexperienced, had stepped into an impossible place and brought stability where chaos tried to rise. They hadn't waited for permission. They hadn't waited for praise. They had simply acted because the situation demanded it. Back on Earth, people breathed again. Some cried. Some cheered. Some just sat in stunned silence, realizing what had just happened. Humanity had entered the stage that no one believed they could ever reach. They did not arrive with arrogance. They arrived with strength and calm purpose. The galaxy now knew something it had never understood before. When humans arrived, they didn't step in quietly or loudly. They stepped in exactly the way they needed to, like a force that believed in responsibility. A force that protected without hesitation. A force that changed everything the moment they arrived.